Welcome back to Missing. I am Tim here today with Lance. Lance, how are you today?
I am doing fantastic today, Tim. Thanks so much. The guest that we have on, he is a regular. He has been on this show numerous times, and behind the scenes, we work with this gentleman quite often for a number of missing person cases, and he is a staple of our nonprofit private investigations for the missing. But Tim, I need to know how you're doing today.
Thanks for asking. I'm doing well. And yes, we're here with Lou Barry today, who we affectionately call Chief Lou. Well, one, because that's his email address, and two, because he is a former police chief. And he's a great guy. We just love him here, and we love having him on. And he catches us up in this conversation with all the happenings in the nonprofit private investigations for the missing. And if you've never heard any of these other conversations, that's fine, because we sort of start from the beginning with Lou's background, and we get into what he does for the nonprofit. And I think it's a really interesting conversation. And I know we've been gone for a few months, so we haven't had one of these in a while. So this is a nice refresh for this show.
And you do get some updates in these conversations. Granby Girl, we revisit Da Vinci the dog, which is one of our favorite missing cases that we've talked about on this show. But Tim, you mentioned that we've been gone for a few months. I think in the next several weeks, we're going to have that same caveat in our intro, which is, hey guys, like we're sort of back now. Like, we're going to be doing this on a regular basis. So you don't think that we are going to pop in with one episode and then you're going to wait another month or two. So in these intros, just get used to us saying, we know we've been gone, but we're back on a consistent basis, and we're so happy to be back, and we're happy to be sharing these updates and these stories and all of this information to our listeners. Our absence had nothing to do, and this is something we'll repeat as well, had nothing to do with the content itself. It was beyond the content, and we do feel bad that we weren't able to be here to tell these stories of these missing people over the past few months. But we're back, and we're going to be telling the stories.
Yes, we're back, and just want to give folks a reminder. They can check out investigationsforthemissing.org, and that is the website for the nonprofit, and you can donate right there on the homepage. Private Investigations for the Missing runs completely on donations, so if you've got anything you can spare, that is definitely appreciated by the nonprofit. Lance and I are on the board. None of it goes to us. In case anyone's curious, it all goes to private investigators to investigate these missing persons cases.
Newly revamped website, might I add.
Yeah, it looks good.
Yeah, really great updates on that website, and there's an organization called Flip Cause who is crucial in rebuilding this website. And you can check out their website, flipcause.com.
Very cool. Okay, I hope you enjoy this episode. We're going to break quick for commercial here, and we're going to be right back with Chief Lou Barry. Thanks a lot for listening, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast, Chief Lou Barry. How are you today?
Great. How you guys been? It's been a while.
Yeah, it's been a couple of weeks. We've been doing really well. We saw you in person. It's a very rare opportunity. I personally believe that it's a gift to see you in person. We were in Granby, Massachusetts at a very special ceremony that brought one of these stories that we've been talking about for a while full circle. But before we get to that, I don't think anyone needs you to introduce yourself at this point, but just for the sake of redundancy, can you just, for the 4 people out there who don't know who you are, do you mind giving a little recap?
No, I'm retired police chief. I spent 24 years as chief and 11 years before that as a police officer down on Cape Cod. Now, since I've retired, I've been trying to help out the nonprofit private investigations for the missing as much as I can, doing a little bit consulting and investigating on my own on this. In addition, I've been teaching college for over 30 years as an adjunct professor at different colleges, and just finished my final class last week. That's it. I'm done. So I've taught at several police academies. I've served as interim director of the police department, the campus police department twice at colleges, interim position. That's me. That's where I am.
Sounds good. And now you're with Private Investigations for the Missing, helping out with Bruce Maitland's nonprofit. Can you tell us what you do for the nonprofit?
Sure. I can back up a little bit. After I retired, I started doing some private investigating, primarily sexual assault cases for civil suits. And I did a few of those. And then I had some downtime. So myself and a former partner started looking at Brianna Maitland's case, Bruce's daughter. We met with him and then met with Greg Overacker, who I'm sure your audience is familiar with. He's been on here before also. Greg and I started working together on Brianna Maitland's case. And then in around 2018, Bruce started a nonprofit, Private Investigations for the Missing, to supply private investigators to families of missing persons that didn't have the funds to hire one, particularly in these so-called cold cases or cases of historical nature. We started off a little bit slow, but we've kind of developed as we've gone along, as you two well know, and now we're pretty active. My role with the organization primarily is to screen the case requests when they come in, and I talk to the families, I talk to law enforcement when I can get a report, and if it's a case that we accept that fits our criteria, then I find a competent professional private investigator within the jurisdiction. And basically from that point on, they keep me updated on the cases as much as they can. And I report back to the board, usually when we have meetings on our progress, et cetera. So, but the organization itself has grown immensely in the past, I'd say 3 years. We'll hit 500 case requests this year. We're well over 150 at this point this year. And unfortunately, we can't assign investigators to every case because we rely totally, as you know, we rely totally on donations. And if it's not for donations, we wouldn't operate. And one successful 5K race that we had last fall. So basically, that's where we stand right now. We're busy, and we try and focus. We have certain criteria that has to be met. We don't do custodial cases. We don't do international cases. We don't do cases that are obvious homicides that the police are actively involved in. And we don't usually do fresh cases, although I will put kind of a caveat on that sometimes if a database search can help out the person, then in a very limited sense, I'll try and help them out by doing data searches and whatnot. And we've found a number of people that way, as you know, and one schnauzer.
And I want to make sure people understood what you just said. And one schnauzer.
One schnauzer, yeah.
You've actually located a dog, but this is not to say that people should be submitting their missing pets. This one had some special attachments that came with it. The young woman who was the owner of this dog had previously been trafficked for a while. She considered herself a missing person, and then her dog was missing through a set of circumstances, and just everything kind of came together where she reached out. We featured her. She was reunited on Thanksgiving with her dog. Do you want to give a little quick recap of that? Because it's such a sweet story.
Yeah, that's kind of it in a nutshell. I mean, she had called and or sent in a form saying that she needed help, looking for Da Vinci. And I thought Da Vinci was maybe a brother or father or son, whatever. So I talked to her and found out Da Vinci was her schnauzer, which was a service dog, and that she was suffering from PTSD. And she gave me the story about how they got separated. And I felt bad for her. And even though we don't do dogs generally, I told her I'd try and help her out if I can. And make a long story short, doing some data search, I found out where the woman was that had taken the dog, and animal control was successfully obtained the dog back, and she was reunited with dog on Thanksgiving Day. As you said, she called me on the bus ride home from Maryland or Virginia, I forget which, to New York with Da Vinci. She was extremely happy. So that's not our normal client, I will say, but if you can help people, you can help people. That's all.
And you mentioned there were over 150 submissions so far this year. So what is a normal client then for the nonprofit?
Well, I don't know if there is such a thing because every case is different. There's so-called anomalies or abnormalities or whatever you want to call it to every case. But most of our cases, we try and focus on cases that are not current. In other words, we get a lot of requests that, my son or husband or wife or daughter or whatever has been missing for a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks. And we just can't, it takes me that long sometimes to find a private investigator and to go through the steps that we have to go through. So, and we just don't have the funds to be able to fulfill all those requests. So most of our active cases are cases that have been around for a while. We go back, some of them 1978, 2000, early 2000s. Some of them, more recent ones, are at least a year old or a year and a half old. We generally, anything short of that, we wouldn't even probably consider. And most of the time, they're cases that the police department has kind of, I won't say given up on, but is not actively involved in. Not because they don't care or don't want to be, it's just that they don't have the resources to handle their current caseload and historic caseload. I would say the majority of police departments are cooperative and they work with us. They want to help. Some don't. We just took on a case and the department won't talk to us, won't give us a report, won't do anything. But it's very difficult when the family's sitting there and not getting any answers from the police because they just aren't doing anything. And we try to help and we're not getting any answers, just to turn around and tell them, well, sorry, you're on your own. It doesn't sit right. So we have found an investigator to try and get some closure for in this case, granddaughter of the woman that's missing.
And do you ever envision the organization being able to take these cases that are more recent? Is there a way where a private investigator could be assigned to a recent case and not kind of operate against the local law enforcement?
I do not see us ever having the resources to do that. As you know, these cases can get extremely expensive. We had one case, the first month, we got a bill for $10,000. Justified. I mean, it wasn't, it was hours that were put in and mileage and expenses and everything. You can't afford to be doing that, especially in a lot of these cases where there's the person has a mental health issue or perhaps has a drug issue, and they're on the streets, and basically they're there voluntarily, so that even if you find them, what do you do now? You can't make them go home. You can't make them go back to their family. You can't make them get help. So I don't ever see us in a position where we can really help a family like that by hiring an investigator.
And I just wanted to remind folks that they could donate to the nonprofit at investigationsforthemissing.org. And you can check out the site and make a donation and check out all the cases that are covered. Lou, there's a new one here that I don't think we've talked about with you on the podcast. Maura Murray. Can you tell us a little bit about how Private Investigations for the Missing came to be involved in Maura Murray's case?
Way back when, in 2004, Maura went missing around the same time as Brianna, just about a month before. So the Murray family and Bruce Maitland had communications before, and they were kind of I think they may have actually been at CrimeCon or one of those and ran into Greg. Julie Murray did. And I'm not sure exactly how the request was made, but they asked us to help out. So we did so kind of quietly for a little while, just because there's such a social media circus around that case. We didn't really want to get too publicly involved. But we've been working on that now for about 2 years. We've had some good leads that we followed up. We've got a few that are still being pursued. So that's basically where we stand on that case. I talked to Julie. In fact, I emailed her this morning, but we talked last week. And it's a very difficult case in that the investigators are very tight-lipped about what they've done. And I get it. It's their policy. I understand that completely. I've talked to them. I've met with them. I've given them information. I've tried to save us some time by saying, "Hey, have you checked into this particular issue or that particular issue?" And so we're, I think, slowly developing some type of a working relationship. But it's different than like the Vermont State Police, where on Brianna's case, we communicate all the time. We share information, and it's just a different dynamic there. But every agency is different. So
Now, is that a New Hampshire thing, or is that Mora's case specifically?
no, I think it's every state does things differently. In Vermont, the Major Crime Squad handles long-term missing person cases, homicides, things like that. In New Hampshire, it seems that they have a cold case squad, but it's run by the Attorney General's office, not by the state police. So it's a different setup. And that, I believe, is their policy. I don't think it's just Mara's case. I think it's their policy, period. And once you start making exceptions to policy, it's hard to stop making exceptions. So, and I get that. I understand that completely. Like I said, every department's different. Some departments, I'll call them and tell them who we are, what we're doing, and they email me the report that day. But it depends on the department. There's as you know, it's not really one of our cases, but Samantha Tapp, we've talked about her before in Burleson, Texas, and she also has been missing since 2004, and as a result of Jason Watt, who I got familiar with on the Brandon Lawson case. I tried to give him some advice on that case and helped him out a little. And he contacted me about Samantha because he knew Samantha's sister, and asked me to take a look at it. And I went back and forth with Burleson, and Texas law, she was a juvenile when it started, so the reports by Texas law couldn't be released publicly, and that was kind of the end of that. And then they actually contacted me and said, "Look, we've talked it over. It was legal," and they had me sign a contract as a consultant, and were then able to supply the report. So they went out of their way, because and they said, "We'd love to work on this case. We just can't. We don't have the manpower to spend the resources to work on it." So, but they didn't want to just see it sit there and not be worked on either. So I really commend them for that. That not only were they willing to accept the help, they went out of their way to make it happen.
Yeah, it must be a really refreshing moment when you have the cooperation like that with law enforcement and other investigators. I do want to take it back to Mora's disappearance real quick. I just have a question that was probably a quick answer. What was it? Because you said that this has been going on about 2 years now that you've been working with the Murrays and with Julie. And for a long period of time, Tim and I didn't know that this was happening with private investigations for the missing for the longest period of time. So you kept it seriously under wraps. And I'm wondering what it was that came up that made you all decide that you can say it here on the show that you were working with the Murrays and you're continuing to work with the Murrays.
I don't recall that there was any specific one thing that all of a sudden said, "Okay, now we can talk about it." But I think we'd accomplished what we had to accomplish without the publicity, so that at that point we were maybe looking for information and had to get a little more public with it. Again, I don't recall that there was anything specific, but it was time. That's all. That we're at a point in the investigation that it was no longer going to potentially negatively impact the case. And I felt bad for not informing everybody that we were doing it, but it just at the time was the thing to do. I think the appropriate thing to do.
And also smart, because I don't think Tim and I would have been able to keep that secret to ourselves much longer. So the timing worked out.
Yeah, we were excited to hear. Obviously, we started our podcasting, in true crime about Maura's case. So we were really, really excited to hear that a more professional entity than us were really taking a harder look into this. So very happy about that.
And we'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsors.
Thanks to our sponsors, and now we're back to the program. What about other cases? I know there are several here listed on the site. Are there any that you would like to talk about?
Well, first, one thing as a lead into that, I think we just became affiliated with a company that hopefully will help us raise funds. And as one of the things that they offer is website design, and we've totally revamped our website. And I really personally think it really came out well. And one of the things that this will allow us to do is set up what they call campaigns for specific sites, so that if someone's affiliated with a particular case or sees a case that piques their interest or whatever, they can donate specifically to that case, and the funds will go specifically to that investigator that's investigating that case. We've got well over 20 cases up there at different levels of activity. Some are newer than others. Some of them are like I said, dating back to the early 80s, some back just in 2023. One thing that helps us out a great deal is we've got an excellent investigator in Chicago that works free, expenses and everything. He doesn't charge us a dime, and he's got right now 4 active cases. And that's a huge advantage to us. We can get this done. And it's not just him. We have a case, 2 investigators out in Washington, one in Washington, one in Oregon, don't charge us anything. We've got an investigator down in Kentucky working 2 cases, and I know she doesn't charge us anywhere near what time that she puts in. So we're fortunate in that regard, I think. But some of the cases, and I don't want to do them any disservice by not relaying 100% accurately what the case is all about. But for instance, we've got a young lady named Lenine Rogers who went missing in Pennsylvania a number of years ago, and her daughter's looking for her. Lenine was deaf. It's an apparent homicide. Everyone kind of knows who did it, but we can't find Lenine. So we have a former state trooper from Pennsylvania who's helping us out on that case. We've got a case another case down in Kentucky. Again, we're very fortunate. I think you guys met Brad Harper, retired Kentucky state trooper. I think we had him at a board meeting one day, and he's working on this case very closely. The case that I mentioned, the female investigator, this is kind of how things go sometimes. Like I said, when I find a private investigator, I try and find someone who's experienced, basically with law enforcement background, because that helps not only knowing that they have the skills, but the doors open sometimes to former law enforcement. In one particular case down in Kentucky, and I couldn't make any headway with the department, and I was looking around for an investigator, and I found this young woman. I talked to her, and she had no law enforcement experience, not a lot of missing person case experience, but she was into genealogical investigation. That was her specialty. So anyway, she took on the case and developed an unbelievable rapport with the detective that I couldn't do, and got police reports, has seen the video of the interview. As a result of her work, a search warrant was done on a suspect's house. So another case came in down there, and I said, well, she's done a good job. I had her take that one too. And she ultimately got the FBI involved, and they took, I don't know, like 20 samples out of a motor vehicle on the case, working with the police and everything. So, she's just done a great job with that. And I again, I don't want to get into the names and all that because of the status of the cases at this point. And that's what some people, they have to understand that as private investigators, we can only go so far. And many of our cases ultimately are homicide cases. And if we get to the point where we say, okay, this is most likely a homicide and this is most likely who did it, and we turn that over to the police, our role is pretty much done. We can't prosecute anyone. We can't, get search warrants. We can't do any of that stuff. So there is a limit to what a private investigator can do, obviously.
We talk about the resources that law enforcement has and how they're stretched thin, and that's when private investigations for the missing come into play, because obviously with the thousands and thousands of missing persons in this country over the past 60 years, you just can't keep up with all of that. You can't have one investigator stay on one case for their entire career. So that's the importance of private investigations for the missing. But what happens when PIs for the missing starts to run out of those resources? Because the number of missing person cases aren't going to go down. We keep talking about funding, and we have these fundraisers, and we did the 5K, and there'll be another one soon. But those are just like little drops in the bucket and in the ocean, really, of the funding that is needed. So PIs for the missing doesn't turn into one of those departments that is like, hey, we don't have the resources. They're like, it's out of control. What are we looking for beyond just the smaller virtual fundraising and, those the 5Ks and everything in order to make this grow?
Well, I think we're on the right track with these case campaigns, because people might have a vested interest in a particular case because maybe they know the family, or that they knew the missing person or whatever. And if they know that the money that they're donating is going towards that case specifically, that's a huge help, as opposed to just donating to the nonprofit and not knowing where. There's a lot of people looking at nonprofit and they don't know where the money's going to wind up. And as you know, no one in our organization gets a dime, except for the private investigators that we hire. I mean, everyone's a volunteer, myself, you guys, everybody, board of directors. And like I said, many of our private investigators donate their time, or volunteers. So are we sustainable? I don't know. I don't ever want to say to people, okay, we'll charge you X amount of dollars to do your campaign, because that's not the goal of the organization. It's not why it was set up. And, I get concerned sometimes when we get these big bills that at some point we're going to say, well, we can't take any more cases on, because, once you commit to a case, it's very difficult just to say, okay, we're not doing that anymore because it's costing us too much money. So once you commit to a case, you don't know how that could be over with tomorrow, or it could be over with 20 years from now. One of the advantages that we have is that, as you said to me, if you work for a police organization, when I was a police officer, I had an investigation. I did it. I either solved it or I didn't solve it, and I moved on to another case or cases. And one of the advantages of a private investigator is, okay, I can focus on your case and not have 20 other ones sitting there waiting for me, although sometimes that is an issue where, especially when they volunteer and they work for free, we're not necessarily a priority of, they have a business to run, I guess, and they've got to keep income coming in, obviously. But so far it hasn't been a problem. So, ideally, it would be nice if we got some type of donor that would, a sponsor, a corporate sponsor that where we knew we had X amount of dollars coming in every year. But so far that hasn't happened, unfortunately. And, as I said, these things can be expensive. We had a case that actually they'd love to do a podcast on out in Washington State, where the woman went missing in 1978. That's Barbara Ann McClure. And there was a potential sighting of her a couple years later. So the daughter said, "Why don't we get a age progression done?" Well, I checked around and I found a guy that did one, and he did it for free for us as a donation. But even he said, I can't do this all the time. I'm running a business here, and I understood that. But he did a great job with it. So we're kind of making a little progress on that case. We've got a very good former homicide detective from Seattle that's investigating it. So, we're hoping, ideally, maybe she is alive. We don't know. She'd be 70 now. So you don't know. You never know. But
Okay. Wow. And she went missing when she was 24. So she's been missing about 50 years almost?
Yeah, about that. 47
Jeez.
years, 46 years, something like that. Yep.
Is it possible she doesn't know she's missing?
Anything's possible on these cases, but I doubt it. I think if she went missing on purpose. For whatever reason, I don't know. And I want to say she went missing on purpose. She disappeared on purpose. And again, if it's a voluntary disappearance and we locate her, then all we can do is ask her, do you want contact with your family? And if she says no, and this has happened, I found a couple people that I said, your family's looking for you. And it's like, so I don't want any contact. Well, I can't then turn around and violate that. So I'll just tell the families, look, I located them. They're fine. They don't want contact. They're adults. There's nothing you can do. Nothing you can do about it.
This Barbara McClure case, it seems like police seem to think there's a possibility she was abducted as well.
Yeah, I don't think it's clear cut that she's alive. Someone who allegedly knew her well saw her, they believe, in Hawaii, which is the family used to go to Hawaii fairly often, I guess, on vacations or whatnot. So that's not out of the question that she would be out there. Approached her, called her by name, and supposedly this woman turned around and ran away. Was it her? I don't know. I don't know. But I think at the time, certainly the police, under the circumstances, felt that there was some type of foul play involved. And that, again, very well could be the case. We just don't know.
Are you asking us to go to Hawaii to look for her?
That would be a trip that would probably take more expertise, and perhaps someone like myself would be better going there.
Well, but we can podcast there and bring our equipment.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's only the responsible thing that can be done.
Live from Maui.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow, that's interesting though, because so she went missing from the Seattle area and is suspected or potentially was seen in Hawaii.
Yeah, but again, that was 1980, so even that was 44 years ago. So
right, and I'm sure like airline records are not as easy to come by from back then as they would be today.
And that's one of the things that we run into on these cold cases. It's not just airline records, but records in general. A case, the older the case is, the more difficult they are. A lot of times, and we've run into this both in mostly in Maura's case, in Brianna's case, both people die. And, you're talking 20 years after an event, people pass away, and witnesses' memories an eyewitness is bad enough. You can't 100% believe what they think they saw anyways, but give them 20 years and, their memory can be very different than what they actually witnessed, unfortunately. Records, I'm consulting on a homicide case out in Yakima, Washington. and 1957 homicide of an indigenous female, indigenous of person, Native American. And there's no reports. No one can find a report. Talking to police departments, our records don't go back that far. Can't find an autopsy. I have a death certificate with the cause of death and everything, but no autopsy report. So the family, or the daughter, who's now 70, just wants to find out what happened to my mother. That's all she wants to know, what happened to my mother. And the answer is just difficult because there's no records of anything, unfortunately. I don't know. It's a difficult case anyways.
Yeah, I mean, they're all difficult, right? I hear people who don't get involved in this world as deeply as we all do, and they say it's like nearly impossible to go missing nowadays. But it's not. Like, look at the number of people that went missing immediately after COVID. Like, we had this like wave of people that went missing in like late 2020, 2021, and it was like that isolation just kind of triggered them to make that decision, or something triggered them. But they went missing in the 2020s, and they're still not found. And you still have people from, like, I'm just looking on the website, you have the Hawkins twins, 1963. So, I mean, yeah, people went missing in the 60s, and circumstances were there that caused them to still be missing. Same thing today. People will find a way to go missing if they really want to go missing. And also, people will find a way to cover up someone who's missing if they don't want that person found. Other than technology, this is like an impossible question, I'm sorry. How did people manage to get away with it today if they have done something to somebody and then said, no, your mom got on a bus and that's the last I saw of her? And we're talking about, with today's technology.
I think cases that happen today are investigated more thoroughly, maybe, and that's not necessarily a reflection on the skill level of investigators from years back, but that technology wasn't there then; it's there now in many cases. And I think you're talking homicides, basically. But so, and if think places like Othram Labs are making huge inroads into identifying bodies that have never been identified. There's a huge number of people out there who haven't been identified that are sitting in a morgue somewhere or whatever. And Granby girl, case in point, the one that we started talking about, was a homicide victim in the late 70s. Didn't know who she was, didn't know who killed her. And it went into up to 2 years ago before they finally, Othram Labs made a comparison of her DNA to a niece who had submitted to one of the companies that accepts DNA. And they identified her and her son through DNA technology. And so she finally had a name, and there's a strong person of interest who's now deceased. I don't know if he'll ever be proven that he in fact did it, but I would say a 99 and 9/10% likelihood that he did. So it finally brought closure to the family who, his son that you met. And I think you had him on a podcast too at one point. He didn't know who his mother was for how many years, and, brought some closure to him finally through technology. And by the way, while I think of it, it's Dave Middleman's birthday today. If you have.
Oh, well, happy birthday, Dave Middleman.
Shout out David of Othram. Yes.
Yeah, I'm sure he's taking time off to enjoy it.
I doubt it.
I doubt it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, the Granby Girl dedication was really nice.
Yes.
Nice to meet some of the local law enforcement out there and some other journalists, and nice to see the family in person as well.
Well, what I was impressed with is Mike from Othram Labs flew out from Texas to attend the dedication of the new monument, which I thought I was very impressed with. The fact that, I know they do great work and everything, but that they care enough to send somebody out to participate in that and meet the family and everything. I thought that was really special that they did that. And it was I think it was a nice ceremony. I think you guys taped it, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, we did. We're planning to bring it to the Missing podcast feed as well. We did some interviews after the dedication, but we missed Mike from Othram. I will say he scampered out of there, and I didn't even get to meet him, so I was a little sad about that. I wish I guess interrupted. I know everyone was talking and everything, but I wanted to meet him, but that's okay.
It was, I thought we'd be out of there in 15 minutes, and everybody stayed around talking for about an hour, I think it was.
Yeah.
And then we went and had a brief refreshments and everything at another location, and people stuck around. The district attorney was there for quite a while, and I thought it was very. I think it meant a lot to the family. They sent me a thank you afterwards, but I think it meant a lot to them as it has all along, that the community cared about this unidentified woman, female, for so long, and helped play a part. Private Investigations for the Missing did the fundraiser to buy the new stone, and overnight had more than tripled, I think, the money that was needed. And the balance that was left, the family donated back to Private Investigations for the Missing.
That's so cool. I love every part of the story, because we always talk about closure and like how it has a different sort of rolling definition depending on what story you're talking about. And this is about as like full circle closure as you can make it. I mean, she was unidentified. Her son, her family, they didn't know where she was. And then years later, after she's got this grave marker that just is very vague, like she doesn't have a name, and then technology finally catches up to it, and you have the old investigators speaking with us at that ceremony, at the commemorative ceremony, and the gentleman who had discovered the body was talking about it when that happened so many years ago. So you have like the old past coming to like this new technology, and all of these bridges are coming together, and even her son speaking with us and being there with Othram. The new technology, PIs for the Missing, is in there because the gravestone's there. And I know that it's like 99.999 that the person who did it is deceased, and we can't be 100% sure, but we're like 99.999% sure. So there's some closure there. And then the little reception after, it was like, it just felt like everything had come so full circle, and there was closure, and just such a cool story. I just thought that was like about as satisfying as it could get.
I agree with it. And it's one of the things, like I said, I was chief here for 24 years, and this homicide occurred, I don't know how many years before I came to town, but well before, maybe 8 or 9 years. So it wasn't a case that I personally worked on initially. We got some tips over the years that we followed up on, nothing concrete. But, although I didn't really think about it too much, when it came up again, it was like there was some unfinished business there. Had this case, and it was, it's a small town. We've only had a handful of homicides in the existence of the town, maybe 6 or 7 at the most. And so this one particular case, even though I think all the other homicides have been solved, and except for perhaps one of them, but in this one where the victim wasn't even identified, it's just like you have this, an unfinished book or something that, you want to finish. And it felt really good when they called me up and said, "Hey, we identified her." I was like, "Wow, that's fantastic!" It felt good to know that at least the family had closure on there.
Yeah, and that's a good way to put it. Like this unfinished book, it was like all these chapters of this one story, and each chapter wasn't quite done. And then even with her son, he's I don't want to give his location where he's at because he's a very private person, but he looks out his window and there's like state troopers walking up his driveway, or local police walking up his driveway to tell him. And I thought that was just such a wild moment in his life. And I remember the first time you told the story, and then the second time you told the story, I asked the same question, which was, is it normal for police officers to be walking up your driveway? And what did you think? Like, how does your heart drop when you see that? So I just picture that, like when you said it was like this book, like all of a sudden his chapter is coming to an end, and your chapter being the chief, and even the headstone, it's unbelievable. Just so cool.
Yeah, it was a good feeling all the way around, I think. And aside from knowing 100% who did it, I don't think it could be any better way to close off that case. I wish they all were concluded that way. But
I know.
Although you'd rather find them alive, obviously, than deceased.
And we'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsors.
Thanks to our sponsors, and now we're back to the program. Well, Lou, is there anything else you'd like to say here today on this episode?
Just that. Again, we run on donations, and it doesn't go in our pocket. It helps a family somewhere find a missing person. So whether someone out there wants to help fund a specific campaign or just donate in general, and we put it where we need it, it doesn't matter. It's a fact that we can't run without funds. And I hate the financial aspect of of this job. That's my least favorite part of it, is worrying about money and telling investigators, hey, we can't pay you $250 an hour. We have a set rate. That's all we pay, period. And we pay by the hour, but it's a very low rate compared to what many of them earn, and their expenses, of course. So, but that's the least tasteful part of my job, I guess. It is nice though to be able to at least, what I tell people, we don't guarantee that we can resolve a case for you, and no one can do that. And if an investigator says that, then they're not being honest about it. What we can guarantee is that we'll try, and what we offer them is the knowledge, at least, that someone is trying and someone is, making an effort to find out what happened, or to bring closure or whatever to the families. We have a tip line, obviously. I think it's on our website. If anybody has information about one of our cases, or for that matter, another missing person, I mean, if they have information about somebody else that's missing, any information we get goes to the authorities. We don't, keep it a secret. Our goal is to find people, and whether we find them or the police finds them or somebody else finds them, it's irrelevant. It's, so if the information comes in, we'll get it to the right people one way or the other, even if it's not our case. There's both an email address there and a toll-free number.
Yep. The number is 866-331-6660, or you could email PIFTM, which stands for Private Investigations for the Missing, PIFTM-tips@gmail.com.
And the other thing is, if someone has expertise in a certain area and wants to volunteer, there's a place on the form on the site where they can put, I want to volunteer, and we'll see if we can find a niche for them within the organization. We've got a great board of directors. We got a couple retired state police colonels on it. We've got an assistant DA on it. You guys are on it. But there's always work to be done. There's always, things that can be done behind the scene. One of our investigators volunteered to do our Facebook page for us, so she's maintaining that for us.